A lot of those people are going to end up in this week's numbers when it comes tomorrow for unemployment. And that is simply because the Democrats wanted to play games one more time. It's what they did when we moved the CARES Act. They held that up another week. And now we have 22 million reasons they should have said yes a lot earlier.
What was the reason for the Democrats' delay? Well, you won't hear because media's not going to ask them that question. Queen Pelosi had an agenda, and the mainstream media is not going to stand in the way of that. They're not going to try to make Pelosi's life any more complicated with the efforts to do more of a transformation of the country. Tens of millions of people losing their jobs. The consequences of this, we keep repeating it here on the show, and I know many of you are currently in lockdown at home dealing with the very, very hard realities of what this lockdown means economically, financially, and for your day-to-day mental health, for the prospects for you and your family's future. There's a huge divide that we are seeing between those who have savings and paychecks still coming in and those who have neither of those things. And people who have neither of those things feel very differently about the shutdown because they're really bearing the costs and consequences. I'm bored, I'm annoyed, and I'm not, I think that this is unnecessary. But yeah, I'm lucky. And I wake up every morning knowing that I'm lucky that I have not yet lost my job or lost my employment because of this. And that's one of the reasons why I make such an effort to reach out, not just read about, but also talk to people who have lost their jobs, to understand what's going on in the rest of the country and advocate for those people because they need a voice in all of this. The voice that we've been dominated by for the last 6 weeks is that of the shrill, panic, fear-mongering, lockdown consensus. And if you try to say anything about the economy, you want grandma to die for your 401k and all this other stuff. And that's not fair. It's not honest. It's not reality. Now the UN. Now, I'm somebody that questions projections across the board. As you know, I don't think that most human beings can predict the future. Even experts can't predict the future. If they could, we'd all be in much better shape, wouldn't we? Things would be much better off. But the UN is saying, and I mentioned this in the show yesterday, I meant to get to it, that there is the prospect of famine around the world, that millions of people might starve, including starving to death, as a result of the global economic recession that is, yes, in part from just the virus hitting us, but also the shutdowns, there's no question, have made the economies much worse. Much worse. We know this. So there are costs to this that are longer term. There are costs associated with these decisions that we will not see for some time, but they could be truly horrific. But they're not. No one wants to focus on those right now in the shutdown chorus. Oh, no, shut it down, shut it all down. And until the smart people tell us not to. Well, when's that going to be? We're going to face a resurgence of this in the fall, aren't we? Oh, and then it might be worse. It might coincide with a bad influenza season, too. I mean, it could be even worse. This is what we know. So we can either learn to move forward as a society, protect people as best we can, and live through this as a society, or we can continue living in this delusion that the lockdown can go as long as it has to go. Look, I know Trump has said state by state, which is the right move, and I think we are as a country moving in the right direction. But there are definitely some holdouts right now, and there's a stubbornness that is not just rooted in the fear, and it's a fear for good reason. I understand this virus is very real; it's killing a lot of people, and it is scary. But there's also a slowdown of this and an exaggeration of the need for that, the slowed reopening. That's obviously political. I mentioned also yesterday, sorry, there's so many stories. There's actually so much going on in all of this that I feel like I never get to tell you everything I want to on any given day. But here's the producer Mark, did I talk about the earliest case yesterday on the show, or did I skip it? I
believe you skipped that.
I skipped it. Thank you. Okay. So here's what happened. California did some testing on this one, and they looked at an autopsy. And what we had believed was that in California specifically, the first case of COVID-19 that resulted in death was February 28th or 29th, very, very end of the month. We also know that the timeline of death for this disease tends to be 2 to 3 weeks generally speaking, from infection. For someone who does die from this, it takes 2 to 3 weeks for them to die, in most cases. So now they found, because they did an autopsy and tissue samples, they found that there was someone in California who died on the 6th of February. It's a whole, basically a whole month earlier, which means that person was likely infected at least 2 to 3 weeks before that, which brings us to a case in California in mid-January, much earlier than was thought. And what's the likelihood? You have to ask this, because this is not a person from Wuhan, or this was not someone that had the direct travel connection to the outbreak of the virus in China. What's the likelihood that this was the first person or among the first people in California to get this disease? Well, given that we know that the fatality rate is at least less than 1%, or 1% or less, we can say, it's very probable, almost certain, that there were other people, in fact, likely many other people infected before this individual became infected in California. So how far back does it go? The answer is nobody knows, but it does bring us to, at a minimum now, with an established scientific basis, you're looking at the first case in California a couple of weeks into January. So we'd say, let's say around January 15th or so. Now it's not exact, but that's so by mid-January, this thing was already in California. This disease was already in California. And I think we're going to find out that it was even earlier in New York than was previously anticipated too. So this does affect our perception of how many people have already been exposed to this. You know, you have all these serology studies that are showing 5, 10, 15, sometimes even 20 or 25% of a random sampling in an area have already developed antibodies to this disease. In New York, we just told you today, they're saying the early statistical analysis of the antibody testing they're doing in New York, where I am, is that close to 2 million people, 1.7, 1.8 million, depends on the math, but, you know, close to 2 million people have likely been exposed to this already. So what does that tell us about the rest of the country, and what does that tell us about how many people have been exposed to this and what the fatality rate really is like? This has to do with fatality rate. It also has to do with how quickly many of us can go back to work. So much weeks earlier than was previously known, there were cases in California. And I have a feeling we're going to find out that because remember, there's also the very real possibility that people were dying of this in the middle of January and it was thought to be flu, or they died at home. And nobody knew, especially if it was an older person, and you know, it might have been coded as flu. It could have been hiding among the flu population. And I've been told that by doctors. That's an easy scenario to have happened. Not provable, it's theoretical. But now we're getting into, okay, so was it late December, early January that this thing was already bouncing around some parts of the United States that are international travel hubs? I think the answer is probably yes, but we can't go that far back yet. We don't know. But the data is pushing us to see that there are a lot more infections with this than previously known. And I mean, I am very curious to get a serology test done myself. I know that they think that there's a large percentage of asymptomatic cases. At the maximum spread of this disease, I was on the subway constantly for long periods of time. And also going to very crowded grocery stores and dealing with a lot of people all the time. So statistically, my chance of being exposed to this is already 1 in 5 in New York. But I'm also a young person who's going on the subway all the time and very active and going out and about. I shouldn't say young, but, you know, youngish, going out and about. So we'll all see. We'll all see what our exposure was in this city. But it's worth remembering that there's a lot of information that we still need before we can even make sound decisions about what we should be doing going forward, but also to be able to assess what we've done up to this point. Because the economic devastation that we are seeing, I mean, I'm getting texts from friends of mine who work on Wall Street who are saying, you know, their chief economists are like, we don't know how this is going to go. No one knows what's really going to happen here. And was it necessary to put us in that position economically? The virus is here. The virus, you know, we don't have a treatment for it. We don't have we don't have the cure for it. That's just an unfortunate reality of our existence right now. But did we have to tank the economy and deal with all the after effects of it, even assuming we get it up and running in the next few weeks, which might be very overly optimistic. Questions we've got to ask.
Something that is concerning to me, because Biden has committed to a woman as vice president, but has stopped short of committing to a woman of color. How important is it, do you think, for Biden to make that commitment? And do you think that not choosing a woman of color, a black woman actually, is a slap in the face to the black female voters who are credited with really reviving his candidacy?
I think Vice President Biden is going to make a smart choice, and I appreciate the fact that he has lifted up women as being a necessary partner in this. I would share your concern about not picking a woman of color, because women of color, particularly black women, are the strongest part of the Democratic Party, the most loyal. But that loyalty isn't simply how we vote, it's how we work. And if we want to signal that that work will continue, that we're going to reach not just to certain segments of our community, but to the entire country, then we need a ticket that reflects the diversity of America.
I wonder if Stacey Abrams, who still thinks she won the Georgia gubernatorial race without any evidence that actually happened, and the media lets her get away with it all the time, that she won. She still walks around saying that she won. Didn't win, but still says she won, and that's considered okay. But Stacey Abrams as a VP pick for Biden. If he doesn't pick a woman of color, the left is going to have a problem with him. We know this. The left is going to, this is the signal that we're being given. You know, he better. And who does Stacey Abrams have in mind for that position of vice president in the Biden administration? Stacey Abrams. You could also have Kamala Harris, a female minority who ran for the presidency. Didn't do very well, but at least was in the race. Stacey Abrams never decided to actually run for president in any way, and now we're hearing that she might be the vice president. Well, we'll see what good old Joe Biden decides to do from down in the basement. I'm still in a state of some degree of amazement here that this is who the Democrats have put forward. But as we see, it doesn't. And this is perhaps the part of this that I should have assumed all along, which is that it doesn't matter. The Democrats they want to put someone who will be a vessel for the Democrat Party's power forward. It doesn't matter who it is. They're going to tell you that person's amazing and brilliant and not Trump, and that's what they're going to do with Biden. Even though more honest voices in the Democratic Party earlier on were willing to say that Joe Biden was not up for this. And he's clearly not up for this. And it's a shame because we are getting a lesson, aren't we, in how important good leadership is right now and what bad leadership can mean. We're seeing it at the state level. We're seeing it at the federal level. Bad choices have real consequences. So now they want to foist upon us Joe Biden, a man who has no history of making good decisions and a history of making plenty of bad decisions. But this is what we're told. Meaning Joe Biden's been wrong on every major foreign policy issue. I mean, Joe Biden, you look back at the plagiarism stuff and all. I mean, it's just bad. It's just bad. But they're going to go forward with it. And the left is also seeing the opportunity here. This will be more of a focus of the show tomorrow, so think of it as a bit of a preview. But Miss Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez here of Queens, New York, is saying this about when the economy reopens. This was also telling. Play clip 3.
There's a lot that we could be doing right now, but ultimately, I think when we talk about this idea of reopening society, only in America does when the president tweets about liberation, does he mean go back to work? When we, have this discussion about going back or reopening, I think a lot of people should just say, no, we're not going back to that. We're not going back to working 70-hour weeks just so that we could put food on the table and not even feel any sort of semblance of security in our lives.
So we're not going to go back to our jobs? That's the answer? Now we're not going to continue to work and make money for ourselves? I also always want to see these stories we hear about the working a 70-hour work week and not being able to put food on the table. I'm not saying it's not possible, but that's a really long work week. And if you're working for minimum wage, even at minimum wage, working 70 hours a week, well, anyway, analysis that we'll have to do another time. But don't go back to your job, she's saying. Don't go back to your job because your job is not good enough. The one that you left, the one that you were showing up to every day and that the government has now shut down for you, it's not good enough. You deserve more. This is why I'm telling you the plan, and they seized the moment here. The Democrats knew it. People are getting paid more to not work than they are to work. They're going to get used to that. A lot of people are going to get used to this. And they're going to be told, well, hold on a second. Or they're going to think to themselves, why should I go back to that job? If the government could just pay me like this and things are fine, why can't I have a $15 or $20 minimum wage when I go back? The government could just insure it. Does anyone have a good answer for that? I mean, we know it's inflation and the government's pocketbook is not endless. And in fact, it's our money that the government's giving back to us. We know but what do you think the political answer is going to be? Remember, minimum wage does not work the way it is intended, but it is still very popular. It's a very popular concept. What are we going to say when you have a whole political movement that there should be a $20 national minimum wage? Oh, it's going to result in job losses and there's going to be people that have less hours. And they'll say, well, then we'll mandate more hours. And the government can backstop. Oh, companies can't afford to pay that. You know what they're going to say? Federal government should look at their balance sheet, and if they can't make enough with that as the shortfall should come from a check from the Treasury. I know that sounds like, oh, come on, Buck, they'll never do that. Really? We're spending trillions of dollars like it's candy right now. And we are, in fact, under the current rule that which the Republicans went along with and the Democrats, we are paying people more to not work in many cases than they would get paid if they went back to their jobs. And for a long time, for a period of months. This is why restaurant owners are saying, I can't get my staff to come back. My staff's deal right now to stay home is too good. So even if I could reopen, I'm not going to be able to reopen. You've had lots of restaurateurs coming out and saying that. I mean, the service industry in particular has just been wiped out right now by the lockdown. But this is changing our perception of what the state's role is in our lives, but also what's possible from the state. Universal basic income, the Andrew Yang idea, and I think Yang might end up running for the mayor of New York. I think if he does, he'll win. He's got that national recognition, and he's a likable guy. He is a likable guy, and he's smart. I mean, he's intellectually very capable. If he were to run in New York, I think he's going to win. But his idea is universal basic income. If the government can pay everyone to stay home for a couple of months, why can't the government pay some people to stay home all the time? You can't work anymore. We're just going to get what was your salary? We'll just give you that salary. These ideas might sound radical right now. Think of the moment that we're in, economically, politically, psychologically as a country. You don't think that AOC and the left and the socialists see this as the biggest opportunity they've ever had? Look what they did in 2008. This is that on steroids. Get ready for it. It is roll call time. Before we do that, though, please do make sure you check in on bucksexton.com. We will be putting up new videos for our long-form interviews there we've been doing with great guests. We got news stories getting posted all the time. We've got a team making sure that site is updated and a source for news stuff from this show. We're going to be posting a lot there. I'm hoping, Producer Mark, how hard do you think it would really be? And I'm springing this on him, guys, on air, so
oh no,
get ready for it. I know. How hard would it be, though, for us to start? I mean, couldn't I just buy a whole bunch of T-shirts and we could just start selling some T-shirts to people on the site? How hard could that really be?
I mean, there's websites that can do it for us and make it a lot easier.
No, but we have to do it through our website because our website's
No. I understand, but right. We can partner with another website like other people do, and they'll handle the manufacturing. Well,
Producer Mark, just in case you feel like you don't have enough to do these days,
I'll get right on that, Buck.
Let's give it some thought. People are asking for gear, okay?
We've said we want to get gear going, but we have to do it the right way.
That's true. People want gear. And we also want a voicemail inbox, which we have had some movement on that this week.
Yes.
Not a lot, but some.
A little bit.
Tiny bit. We've got to figure that one out, too. Maybe we could get maybe our sponsor, Pure Talk USA, could help us out with that. Like set up a Pure Talk USA voicemail box. Wouldn't that be good?
I didn't realize we were having a Buck Sexton Show meeting on the air today.
I'm just putting out some ideas because Team Buck, they weigh in and they like to know what's going on. They like to know behind the scenes. I I had one of my OSS DMing me last night saying, "Where's the Malta podcast?" I'm like, yeah, you're right.
See, that's a good thing. Please bother Buck about the podcast.
I'm a little behind, a little bit, and so I said, all right, I'm going to do it. But
I think you've been saying you're going to give a Malta podcast next week since we started the quarantine.
That's probably true. But I did get a DM last night that reminded me, okay, I owe the team a Malta podcast, so that's coming. I hope they like it. It's just going to be me sitting drinking mezcal, talking about this one moment in history that I think is really cool. So we'll see if people like it. If they don't have, hey, we'll see. We'll figure out a new one. But everyone loves the long form videos so far, so those will be up on bucksexton.com.
And the podcasts.
And the podcasts, which are also going to be up on bucksexton.com. So, and this is where I ask you folks, everyone's home these days, pretty much. I know there's essential workers and such, but we're all stuck home more than we usually are. So it's a great time to tell people, hey, listen to this guy, listen to this show, Buck Sexton Show. And if you get more family members to listen, preferably on even more devices, that's great. And the podcast is really easy to find and listen to. And bucksexton.com, you can find it there. So that's going to be the one-stop shop. And we will actually have a shop there at some point where you can buy things. The one-stop shop for all content. So I'm really hoping that, especially if you're somebody that's been listening to this show for a long time and been part of our team, add it to your bookmarks and just check in on bucksexton.com because we got stuff going up there all the time. All right, Nate. Hey, Buck, I listen to your podcast daily. I can't imagine what you're going through. I live in the small town of Rainer, Oregon, as a machinist, and we haven't seen any action on this virus. I just wanted you to know that I pray for you and yours daily as I listen to you and the stress in your voice that cannot be hidden. Shield time, my friend. Thank you for your input and your honest interpretation of events and issues. P.S. Your burgers look killer, and great job using the cast iron, bro. Take care, my friend. Be safe. Well, Nate, I'm glad you and yours are safe and sound, and I appreciate your support for me here in the city and producer Mark. He's just across the river in New Jersey, so we are in the midst of all this. I'm hoping that my voice doesn't sound too stressed out. It also may just be that these days I'm doing 5 hours of radio a day. So if my voice sounds like it's giving a little bit, it could be stress. It also could just be that my voice box is kind of falling apart. But you got to do a lot of content. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to do. And as far as burgers, for those who didn't see, I post sometimes on Instagram, which you should all please follow me, Buck Sexton on Instagram. If nothing else, that's where you get the best Tallulah content. I post my favorite Tallulah photos and videos there. So that always cheers everybody up. I also do a little bit of cooking stuff there and post some hot takes from the show, et cetera, et cetera. So Buck Sexton on the Instagram. Man, we are multi-platform. Producer Mark, I have a question for you, though. And this one you'll be able to answer without the frustration of the recognition that I'm having a producer meeting on air. Should we do TikTok? It's a Chinese spying program, probably. We're not sure yet, but...
Should we do TikTok? I mean, you have to be funny to do TikTok.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like that. The range is hot today, apparently. Okay. Well, theoretically, if we had good content for TikTok, is that where the cool kids are?
I think so. I'm not a cool kid, so I'm not on TikTok. I'll see a couple funny videos, like that friends share or something, but I'm not actively on it. I don't have an account.
Okay. Well, I'll have to ask the Snow Princess because she's cool. She's young. She's a little older than you, but close.
Yeah, Snow Princess sounds a lot hipper than me and you.
She's a hip lady. Definitely hipper than me. Mark writes in, "Hey, buddy, keep taking the fight to those commie libs." I love messages that start out like that. "I was having a socially distanced driveway beer with my neighbor yesterday. He works for a mid-sized alcohol distributor in North Carolina. And he was saying that they've had to dump over 51,000 gallons, that is not a typo, of undelivered beer for the month of March because restaurants and bars are not open to take delivery. The beer makers need the kegs back, so he's dumping the beer to save on shipping costs. That represented over $600,000 in lost revenue. My jaw hit the ground, to say the least. Just another ramification of these draconian lockdowns that I hadn't even considered." Yeah, Mark, there's a lot of food that's going to waste, a lot of food spoilage problems, and farmers having to plow food under in their fields. And, it's rough right now. It's a tough situation. I mean, I do feel like, there's the good news is that our food supply is so far still very, very robust and uninterrupted. Perhaps, and pardon the aside here, but the bad news is that I think I'm doing my own part to keep the ice cream business afloat these days. I don't know what it is, but when you're in quarantine, having a little bit of ice cream at night before you go to bed, it just feels like, it feels like I earned this. I socially distanced today. Let me have some ice cream. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I agree with you. If I don't eat like crap, I'm going to go crazy.
That's kind of where I am. I'm just like, look, man, I don't know what else to do, but sweet treats are kind of keeping me going these days. Maybe it's stress eating. I don't know. But I've missed one day, but my 100 push-up challenge is still going strong. So there's that, which it's a nice reminder, too. The first few days you do it, it feels like someone's lighting your chest on fire afterwards. And that's a helpful reminder that quarantine is not good for. It's great for, it's not even dad bod. It's whatever the level way beyond dad bod becomes, big boned, it's tough for us out here. We're putting on, it's certainly in New York, we're putting on the LBs. Some of you have yards, you have space. What am I going to do? I'm going to do calisthenics in the 400 square feet I've got here in my living room. I don't think so.
I agree there. It's been a week, I realize now, since I've been outside.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, can you go for a walk?
I could. I'm just being lazy. I work out indoors. Just haven't gone for a walk.
Okay. Richard, Buck, happy Hoosier hellos. The story about people not going back to work till August has merit. I make about $50K a year in a middle management position at a factory gig. We've been furloughed for a month now collecting unemployment. North Carolina pays $350 a week, and with the $600 from the feds, my take-home pay after taxes is $800 a week. That's more than I usually take home. Now, that's after retirement, health insurance, etc., but still, what incentive would someone have to go back to work if they get paid to stay home? I'm daddy daycare in the midterm, which is fun, but I really want to go back to work. 18-month-olds are hilarious. Hopefully we'll get back to work on May 4th, but might be off later. We'll see. Stay safe and keep your sanitized shield high. Yeah, shields high, masks on. Maybe that should be the new rallying cry. As for 18-month-old, that's Tallulah is an 11-year-old, but she acts like an 18-month-old, and that she throws little tantrums if she doesn't like her food. She's also a canine, not a human being, so I feel like there's a little less stress as a result of that. But I'm sure having a young one in the house has got to keep you really, really active. Really, a lot of stuff going on. Producer Mark, have you ever been in charge of a small human for a long period of time?
No, nobody would ever give me that responsibility.
Yeah, this is the longest I've ever had real responsibility for a dog, and I will say it reminds me of an extended version of, didn't they used to, in home ec class, didn't people have to, you took like an egg or a watermelon home and had to care for it or something, like it was a baby, or you took like a plastic baby home and just, it was supposed to, I feel like I remember this from shows in shows in the 90s about the 70s, that this is something that people used to do. In high school, they'd send you home. You have to take care of a baby or an actual like egg. No? Am I crazy?
I remember that being in TV shows. I never actually did it.
Yeah, I never actually did it either, but this is an extended version of that. I got a little Tallulah Baloo here, as I like to call her, and she's a handful. Michael, on Monday, an old friend posted that he'd been sick for 4 days and was going to the hospital for COVID-19. Oh, man. I'm sorry to hear that, Michael. That night I was told he was in an ICU on a ventilator. Yesterday he passed away. Later that afternoon, his family announced the doctor said he didn't have COVID-19. He died from heart problems. I have a niece who's a registered nurse who told me a similar story of a patient who stayed home with COVID symptoms. Finally, she went to the hospital and died of a heart condition. I wondered if my friend would be here if he had gone in when he was first sick and not assume it was COVID. Yeah, Michael, I think, first of all, I'm very sorry for your loss, and I think that a lot of people are looking at this now and trying to figure out, what the best decision-making is here that one can have when you see certain symptoms. And, we're all just thinking about COVID, but all the other health problems are still out there, right? Heart disease still out there, lung cancer still out there, all kinds of cancers. There's a lot of things that we need to be thinking about. But I'm very sorry to hear about your loss. I just got a text message from a friend this morning who I've known for 25 years, and she has a parent who is in. She just told me, I hadn't heard about it before, and she has a parent who's a guy. Her dad's someone I've known for that whole 25-year period. I've spent many, many times at their house, and he is on week 3 on a ventilator. We're praying for him. We're hoping he pulls through. But more and more people I'm hearing from that I know have family members that are hit by this here in New York, and it's tough. It's a very, very difficult, very emotionally charged and just tragic and sad situation. So, yep, I know people too. That's all I can say about it. We're praying for everybody and hoping we all pull through. Alex, with an update from Georgia. At the beginning of the shutdown, I got 7 days off with pay, but I work for a defense contractor and were deemed essential to national security, so we went back to work. All the right-leaning people were fine with it and understood. All the Dems I work with complained and said we should be home getting paid. I don't understand their mindset. I'm proud to be essential to national security, and it beats being unemployed. You and Mark stay safe. Well, what you're really telling me here, Alex, is a continuation or just, another example of what I've been talking about, which is somehow this has become a very partisan issue about when to lock down or not and what drugs work and don't. And, why? That shouldn't be the case. And yet it is. All right, Nathan is up next here. Dear Buck, love the show. Dear Nathan, the show loves you. I'm a trucker, and there's no issue out here with food. Truck stop restaurants are carry-out only, and we eat in our trucks. My co-driver took time off for his health, but most of us are just happy to be working. The air horn is what kids want you to honk. Oh, there we go. See, I knew there was some specific way to describe it. Trucks also have a city horn that's smaller, more like a car. Yeah, no, the air horn's the one that's like, mah, mah. I remember as a kid driving family trips on the highway. That was awesome. The trucker. Bruce and Mark, you ever told the trucker to pull the air horn? When you're like 8 years old, that's like a highlight of life.
Yeah, of course. And when you're on the school bus.
Oh, yeah. The school bus, you and all your friends. Dude, there's nothing. You get like 50 kids like, pull the air horn, pull the air horn. The trucker's like, yeah, woo, pulls it. So, sounds cooler than that, though, as we all know. That sounded a little bit like a duck that's wounded, but it was the closest I could come up with on the fly. Taylor, hey, Buck, I try to listen to you as much as I can on iHeartRadio. I actually listened all the way to the end for Wednesday yesterday. The reason Los Angeles is such an outlier from the other Democrat-run cities is that SoCal residents are attached to their cars. I used to commute into Glendale, Burbank every day for 8 years, and the only good mass transit is the Metrolink trains, which almost parallel the 10 and 210 freeways. LA is trying to build out more rail line, but it's slow. LAX is the only airport that I know of that didn't have a train running through. Stay safe and shields high. Yeah, Taylor, I do think that the difference in the mass transportation system, and everyone's kind of known this all along, right? It makes sense. It's not higher order analysis to figure out that if you got a lot of people every day packed into a small area, which all trains are going to be, and you have a lot of people coming on and coming off, you're going to be at a really elevated risk for major spread of that disease. That's just common sense. And I've been telling family members about this and friends from the very beginning that my sense of this is that we're going to find out that there was a big role of mass transit, and that's what's that was a part of this. So we've started to see there's still some people that are we're figuring out how much that's true and debating it, but it's still going on. Aaron, hey, big fan of the show. This is on Instagram, by the way. You can send me direct messages on Instagram too. Just Buck Sexton, and then send me a DM. Keep it clean, people. I'm a 16-year-old youth entrepreneur. I'm very politically involved. I would love to join you on your podcast as a guest. Aaron, I will pass this to producer Mark, and he will make the determination about how we can get you on the air, okay? Thank you so much for writing in. It's great to have a 16-year-old entrepreneur listening to the show. Let's see here. Cooper. Buck, check out the link for a laugh. It's a YouTube clip from Always Sunny in Philadelphia where they prove the experts are always wrong sometimes. Just thought about it with the current trend of the experts being wrong all the time. Shields high. Well, Cooper, thank you so much for writing in. I do appreciate it. So thank you. And then we have, let's see here. This is from Cap. Hey, Buck, leftist governor of Hawaii tightened regulations and completely closed beaches and said you can fish with a family member but 20 feet apart. even though Hawaii is green according to the map used for reopening. So instead of loosening up a state with 37% unemployment, he tightened the strings. Well, Cap, it's people are making bad decisions all the time, and I think that you're going to see a lot of that with some of these Democrat governors of these states, especially because of the political lens that all this is going through now. Team, please do check out bucksexton.com and tell somebody to download the podcast who's new. We'll have more for you tomorrow. I'm working on that Malta podcast. Until then, stay safe, wash those hands, shields high.